So thinking about reviewing the exam paper that you did, two different questions on population policy. The first one was about China's one-child policy. Most people did a good job of that. Simple things really that you could pick out, and the easiest one were that essentially people should only have 2 children, and the second point that it didn't matter if it was a boy or girl. People did infer other things about what the apple meant, not having enough food for everyone, the umbrella, not having enough shelter, but the simple thing was taken directly from here. 2 children, doesn't matter, boy or girl. The second question asked about why some countries have a high birth rate. Well, really you've got to think about that is what sort of countries. It's probably going to be the developing countries. And why do they have more children? Well, they have more children because maybe they don't have contraception. It may be that they want their children to be able to work on their farm or to provide an income. It may be that they want their children to look after them when they're older. It does say that you've got to have one, so that means that you've got to pick one of these points and then develop it. So it might be that you say that there's not very good education, which means that people don't understand about family planning and the use of contraception. That would be 2 marks. The next question asks about why it's difficult to predict global population and how it might change over time. Well, that relates to the uncertainty of birth rates and death rates, and then we need to think, well, what factors might affect the birth rate and death rate? So it might be changes in the developing world in terms of the attitude towards contraception. It might be that we have things like the one-child policy introduced. That might happen, and that would change the birth rate. It might be that people's attitudes towards families changes, especially in the developing world. As countries develop, they might not need as many children in order to look after them or to work, but then again, if the countries don't develop as fast as possible, they may continue having more children. Then there'll be things like natural disasters, famine, wars. They may affect the death rate, spread of medicine around the world. Really here what you need to do is have 2 points which you develop. So point, example, explanation, PEE, or point, evidence, explanation would be really good, and you need to do that twice. Looking at the second part, really they asked you to describe the graphs and the change between 2012 and 2050, so you need to say that it's increasing, you might want to say it's increasing rapidly, and you want to include some figures. That's how you get your 2 marks. Onto the back, problems of a youthful population. This is essentially that the young people are taking from the economy in terms of education and healthcare, but they're not contributing by paying tax. So that's the main sort of issues you've got. You could put 2 points in here. You could say maybe that they will be an ageing population in the future, but the bottom line is they aren't contributing towards the economy, but they are using up resources. And then finally about migration policies. Big mistake people made here was to talk about population policies. So for migration policies, we want to talk about things like the USA and the UK. They're the examples we had. The real reason that we've got variation, and that's the key point here from country to country, is depending on whether the country wants to increase or decrease its population. So if it wants to increase its population, then it's probably going to have a more lax or relaxed population policy. If it wants to decrease its population, it's probably going to be stricter. Obviously there's some other things about the EU and the open door policy. People wanted to talk about quotas as well, and America and UK are really good examples. UK's possibly got a more relaxed approach in some terms, in terms of who it lets in and allowing ethnic growth, but you could argue that the UK's got a relaxed approach in terms of the EU, but is very strict in terms of non-EU people because they only want skilled people. So really it depends what the country wants, but to get a good mark here, again, point evidence explanation or point example explanation, you need to have 2 points which you develop, and you want to really have some case studies, some countries in there as well, and that's how you'll get the best marks. Some people did get 16, and that was really good.